Thank you all so much for being here and joining us this evening on Friday night. Happy soon to be daylight savings time. My name is Candace. We have a few people still just rolling in, but it's really exciting to be able to have this conversation. I'm really excited to be here with Renee and Sheryll and Ellie and Anne, four people who do really awesome work in the city. And with my compadre, Nathan from the Bronx River Foodway. Nathan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Candace. It's a blast to be with you, co-facilitating this and to be in presence with folks from Kelly Street and New Epoch Seed Library. My name is Nathan. I'm with the Bronx River Foodway in the South Bronx at Concrete Plant Park, New York City's first edible food forest inside of a city park. Yeah, just really excited to be talking about this conversation as we begin to build our own seed library in the park, and we learn from each other. So
yeah, same. Yeah, so Nathan and I both steward public land where we attempt to grow food for the people. My park is going through construction right now, so it's especially crucial to me to be collecting seeds because all of these plants are being given away or going to a landfill. So to be able to kind of collect that genetic legacy and collect the plants that have learned to survive on a capped brownfield on the East River and be able to kind of return them to this land once the park is rebuilt feels just like a prudent thing to do, really. We thought we would get started just by kind of sharing with everyone this graph that was made. I remember first seeing it in an op-ed that Dan Barber from Stone Barns released a couple of years ago with the New York Times talking about the seed industry and the fact that as of 2018, 4 different corporations owned 60% of our planet's seed stock, which is just, I don't know, for me personally, terrifying. And so, I think that's kind of how I think that's kind of the provocation we wanted to begin with in talking about why something like community seed saving is such an essential practice. And I'm so excited that we have Ellie and Anne from the Next Epoch Seed Library and Renee and Sheryll from Kelly Street here together, because I feel like both groups kind of have very different approaches to why they collect seeds. And I think that it's really interesting, and it would be really interesting to see the many ways that work intersects between those two kind of forms of practice. So without further ado, I thought maybe we should just throw it over to y'all and let you guys introduce yourselves. Ellie and Anne, if you guys want to start, and I'm going to let you guys kind of duke it out on who says what when. Let me stop sharing so you guys are kind of a priority here.
Go ahead.
You want to kick it off, Anne? You want me to? Okay. So yeah, Anne and I founded the Next Epoch Seed Library in 2015 at this point, 6 years, which is pretty wild to me. We both had been working, it's an artist-run seed library, and we both had been working with wild urban plants in marginalized spaces that tend to get overlooked as valuable in urban ecosystems. And Anne can say more about her practice, but I think for both of us, we didn't know a ton about plants in the city until we started interacting with these spaces and came to learn how much biodiversity and value there is there, and wanted to introduce that to other folks through a project. So we're kind of an unconventional seed saving enterprise, and that a lot of our work is dedicated to like consciousness raising about the fact that you can save seeds, and there are seeds in the city that are right there, and you can reach out and touch them as you're walking down the sidewalk. But I think as we learned more about what we were doing through actually doing it, we came to realize how valuable some of those plants actually are. And maybe I'll hand it off to Anne to explain a little bit about, maybe a little more concrete about what we do, and then the wild crop cousins kind of phenomenon.
Yeah. So, so when Ellie and I, as artists, first came up with the idea to save the seeds of urban weeds, I thought that was kind of a funny idea because like they're obviously doing fine on their own. They don't need our help. And usually seed saving is like this meticulous thing where you very carefully, you know, like tend to the plants and save the seeds to make sure they're around in the next generation. But you know, weeds obviously they're doing fine. But the more I, you know, learn from Ellie and from other people that we met and talked to, and then just like read about weeds, I found out that they provide really valuable ecosystem benefits to the urban landscape, to humans, to non-humans, and they're going to be important companion species as we move into climate change. I mean, we're already in it, and as you know, maybe native species may or may not be up to the challenge of climate change. So, and also, as Ellie mentioned, the wild crop cousins we learned about, there are urban weeds that are cousins of some species that we eat. Like there's prickly lettuce, which is related to lettuce. There's Queen Anne's lace, which is a wild carrot. There's a wild buckwheat. Just a few examples, and these wild versions of agricultural crops can and do have maybe possibly like resistance to certain pests or other qualities that might make them stronger in different ways or more adaptable in different ways, and it's possible for them to be crossbred. So there are seed banks that are collecting these things, and I guess we're maybe a small version of one of them. So, you know, I had like an intuitive sense that weeds were valuable. I know I liked them. I like being around them. But through working with Ellie and, you know, years in the next Epoch seed library, I really came to understand like the specific value that these plants have.
Thanks, Anne.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's a great intro to y'all's work. And I think I'd really love to hear from Renee and Sheryll now. If you guys could talk about Kelly Street and your seed keeping practice, as well as all of the work that you all do there. It's such a beautiful space.
Renee, you want to go first?
Okay, I guess I'll start. So I guess the seed keeping practice started when I was an apprentice. That was one of the things, along with herbal products and herbalism, that I thought was important, that I wanted to do. So I started learning about it. So it was wisdom workshops, it was reading books, it was just deciding that's something I do. And also because I went to a Just Food conference where there have been Caribbean crops, and I thought, well, that's something I want to do. Want to know more about it, another way of getting in touch with my family back in Barbados and know more about them. I've always enjoyed pigeon peas. I just enjoy eating them. So I thought, let me try to learn more about them than just from an eating perspective. You know, those are things I didn't do. It was another part of my learning how to be resilient. Part of learning to be a farmer and learning how to do it was because I didn't have the attitude that I could rely on supermarkets, rely on the neighborhood I lived in, and because I was always having to travel outside of where I lived to get food, just to be able to feed myself because it was more affordable or it was more culturally appropriate. So I figured, this is one more thing I can do to survive, to be resilient, to be sustainable. And also I just found interest. It was just something in me that called for me to do it. I can't really explain it any other way than that. And then I just became more and more interested in it and just had to find another way to do it. So it's like we keep escalating what we do, and we have discussions like where we did well, where we have to do better, our failures, you know, just things we decide to do at the beginning of the year, or we've decided that this year we've got to do better.
Nicely done, Renee. I don't know if I can add much onto that. My foray into seed saving is part of my journey as a community gardener and an urban farmer. Kelly Street Garden is one of my loves, but I also am the food and nutrition coordinator at New Roots Community Farm. And that is where I started to seed save, because the population that I work with were primarily refugees and asylees when I first started at the farm. And these refugees and asylees would bring their seeds and ask for them to be planted because they wanted to be connected to something from their home country, and they wanted to be connected to their own cultural food. And that is how we started. And it has been a very, very interesting journey, because now it's an integral part of the work that we do around food and food security. And as Renee says, we plan at the beginning of the season what crops we're gonna seed save, where we're gonna plant them, and how much diversity we want in the garden. So for me now, seed saving is an integral part of being a farmer. It actually encapsulates everything within that circle, within that journey. And I'm not an expert at seed saving, but it's something that I've come to love and something that we have come to expect as a part of the work that we do.
Really gorgeous. I think that really leads into kind of talking about the practical components of this work. The fact that you all, and I appreciate that you say that you're not an expert. None of us are experts. We're all just learning all the time, right? And I think that's why it's really it's good for us all to kind of embrace, right, the concept of being an amateur, right? Somebody who does something because they love it. I am curious if you could kind of speak more about what are the specific, so for Ellie and Ann, like they are foraging seeds most of the time, right? You guys aren't growing crops out to save seeds. Whereas I know at Kelly Street, you all are growing plants expressly to not only keep the seeds for yourselves, but you also work with actual seed like distributors, correct? Is that right? And so what does that practice look like? Like how does one grow plants for seed as opposed to growing them for food? And I mean, this actually taps into, I think Audrey said in the chat that, they've been growing basil and they're waiting for it to flower, but they've also been harvesting it, right? So it hasn't had a chance to go to flower, right? So it's a different way of approaching working with the plant, correct?
That is correct, because the practice of seed saving is also a question of land access. You have to have enough land to be able to practice seed saving. And if you're growing food for your community for food security, that means that you're taking out parts of the land that you would normally use for production to save seeds. But at the same time, as we all know, as community gardeners and urban farmers, buying seeds is an expensive endeavor. So to me, it's a win-win situation to actually make a plan to save some seeds so that we can have production the following year, than to spend money that we don't have to buy seeds. It's kind of like a dance with your community members, because I remember the first time we were growing Bissap, and every time I came, the plant would be cut down. And I'm like, and being a novice at seed saving, I didn't realize that I'm growing Bissap, a crop that's loved by West Africans, and for them, it's a crop that they harvest and they eat. And therefore, we will never get any seeds from this if they keep harvesting it. So the dance is, okay, this bed, you can harvest it. But you see this bed, don't touch it at all. Because we need to be able to harvest the seeds so that at some point it becomes adapted to our microclimate and we will get more resilient crops. And this is the first year I think we'll be successful at harvesting Bissap seeds. So I mean, that's a story to say that, it's something that you have to weigh, and you have to think through whether it, how beneficial is it to grow seeds when what you're doing is growing food for your community that suffers through food apartheid. And we think it's not either or, it has to be an and. And it delves into the deeper question of food justice and food sovereignty, and why it's important for us to have that access to land and to advocate for growing spaces in the city, and for them to be those green and growing spaces in perpetuity, and why we should fight even deeper so that this is part of the urban built landscape. And we have representatives that is part of their political platform.
Yeah, that comment about space and land really resonates, because when you think about growing those cultivars of like peppers or whatever, you really do need, I mean, you need space for that. I'm wondering about like with foraging, I mean, very different trade, but thinking about like, how does that, so what you've described, Sheryll, and what I'm thinking about with land is kind of this priority of and like thinking of relationship with land, right? You know, the next Epoch, y'all are not really concerned about that, it seems. You're more so just like kind of using what land exists, and just like, I'm wondering kind of like, yeah, what is your perspective of land stewardship in that regard, as some vie for land and you are kind of just taking what's around, right? Or using what's around.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts on that, Anne? I've got some, but I'd love to, if you have. Yeah. I mean, what came to mind for me partially is the lack of space for a lot of the plants we work with. I mean, Anne said they're doing fine, which is true. We think of them as very productive because they're able to survive in sidewalk cracks, but we do see in places like New York City, the populations get restricted. And I've had a similar experience of, I'm coming back to collect seed here because this is an amazing pokeweed plant and it's, you know, survived and is just going to fruit. And I come back and it's been chopped and cemented over. So there are these bottlenecks of genetic diversity that I think probably relate to what you're thinking about with growing out seeds in a community garden, in terms of how these plants that are isolated in these little patches of urban land that may or may not be privately owned, or maybe these weird little slices of supposedly public land, and how those plants are able to interbreed. So as we've gotten to know more about this, we actually have started a little program that Candace knows a bit about for collecting a specific plant, evening primrose, which has a lot of pollinator benefits and also a lot of health benefits, as you know, the oil has a relationship to menstrual cycles, and there's a lot of beautiful reasons to want this plant to do well. It's indigenous to the area, but it's considered weedy. So we've been collecting the seeds from all over the 5 boroughs and up and down the Hudson in order to be able to make more genetically diverse primrose. So even though we usually don't have land, we actually are borrowing a private lawn right now and have torn up squares of it. And I'm growing out this diverse primrose and I'm sharing it with the birds because it's really, really valuable for them. But it produces, you know, 10,000 plus seeds, you know, in a square meter. So yeah, thinking about what relationship that has, because this lawn that's usually a privately owned lawn that no one is supposed to interact with is now open for people to wander through, and it's right next to a community garden. So we're hoping, as we kind of make this space more public, that eventually it might get it might become part of the community garden as the owner of it realizes he's not doing anything but mowing it. So yeah, steps along the way.
I think like what we're doing with Lawn Lab sort of questions what is good stewardship for land.
That's true.
Stewardship is the job of supervising or taking care of something, according to Google. You know, if you have a big, you know, well-maintained lawn, then that is usually seen as good stewardship, you know, desirable if your neighbor has a, you know, beautiful lawn. But it, you know, turns out it's also harmful to the ecosystem, monoculture, possibly using chemicals that don't just stay on the lawn. So there's that.
Yeah, Lawn Lab has kind of become a part of our seed keeping praxis in a way, which is this getting a hold of privately or institutionally owned lawns and disrupting them. So
I love that. And I love that in both instances, right? So you guys are then, so you're now also growing stuff out for seed, right? And
Yeah.
you're taking these seeds from all over the place and letting them kind of, you know, have free love, right? Whereas when oftentimes when you're trying to grow something out expressly for seed, Sheryll, Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, you're trying to kind of keep it separate from the other plants. Is that correct? I've never done this. So like, I'm a total noob here asking like, seriously, like when someone's growing something out for seed, like let's say you're growing a particular type of tomato, how do you keep it from pollinating with the other ones, you know?
With that, you have to understand how much distance you need between the plants. So I have a listing that tells me that. So like when we do corn, it's one sort of corn. It's not going to be 2 or 3 of them. We don't have that kind of space in Kelly Street. So that's the things we take into account. If we're doing it, how much square footage that you need between each plant, or you're going to have a cross, or maybe that's what you want to do. So those considerations are always taken into account. Corn, one thing, we're fighting the squirrels and every other animal that's there. Not Meanie, of course, but every other animal that's there. So yeah, Meanie's the cat. So yeah, that's the things we take into consideration when we're growing for seed. How many different varieties can we have? So basil, we're not worried about that. We have a lot of different kind of basils. So we have Tulsi, holy basil, purple basil, the regular Genovese, all those basils we don't worry about. But stuff like corn, tomatoes, that would be more the worry if we're trying to grow it for seed. Corn, we do, yeah. But also tomato, we really haven't grown that for seed. So it's more or less the Malakia will grow for seed. African crops of the diaspora, we're growing that for seed. Stuff like tomatoes, not so much. So those are some of the considerations that we do.
That's awesome. And I feel like I have some insight to where these seeds go, but once you've now, you know, learned the spacing, you've grown out your seed, you've had a successful batch of seeds. And Sheryll was saying this season has been a success, which is exciting to share in that celebration. But yeah, like what's next? Are you just keeping these within the garden?
No, some of them have been given away, but possibly a seed swap. Put it together with a bunch of people, come to Kelly Street, we swap seeds or someplace else, or when we're having events, if you want seeds, come and take them, we'll give them to you. So, you know, possibly a seed exchange, or if you know someone somewhere else, they'll email you, let you know, well, I would like some seeds, and you'll send them too. So that's what happened when I did a Green Thumb workshop last year, or should I say earlier this year. Someone emailed me and let me know they would like some of the seeds, and it just went to them.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to gain traction or we want to gain some leverage or power, we have to share our seeds with our community. We also sell some of our seeds. We grow za'atar and gandules, pigeon peas specifically for True Love seeds. We have also grown, what else? We have grown Malakia too for True Love seeds. But our strongest crops for them that have been consistent and strong and have high germination are our za'atar and our pigeon peas. But our other crops, as Renee says, we have no problems sharing and swapping. And one of the things I have to say also that, you know, you asked about spacing of spacing crops for seed, because it is because we are growing, you know, these culturally relevant crops for diaspora. There's no competition between species really, so we are lucky in that sense. What is the challenge is space. You know, how much space? That is the challenge. How much space can we devote to growing seeds, and the decision that we make about what seeds we're gonna save. We're limited by that.
Yeah, and just to offer folks context, Kelly Street is there, it's not like y'all can expand. You're surrounded on all sides by buildings, right? But then do you also grow them at New Roots? You grow out for seed at New Roots as well?
Yes, we have begun to do it. We have a half an acre there, so we have a little bit more space to be able to expand. And you know, we have grown a community where people are, you know, going seamlessly between Kelly Street and New Routes, and you know, we just have this community between us, and we try to share that as much as we can with the rest of the South Bronx.
I think you make such an important point about space and land. And, you know, Nathan and I are both organizing right now with a group to try and kind of make more land available to folks for food production, cultural production, et cetera. I mean, are there ways in which, like, I mean, would you all expand more? Would you have the capacity to expand more if we could hand you 5 acres? I'd love to give you 5 acres for your birthday, Sheryll.
Yeah, I would take 5 acres. Yeah, I'll dedicate, Renee and I would probably dedicate a whole acre to just growing seeds. You know, so yeah, 5 acres, yeah. When you have it, pass it on, definitely.
Yes, create that miracle. I want to see it.
All right, everybody on this Zoom. So it be.
Out of curiosity, Candace, just a moment. I'm wondering, across the city, is there a garden that's dedicated solely to seeds, like raising seeds?
I don't know of any. I
I'm
mean,
like
if anyone does, if anyone's in the chat, please let us know if you know of places that are expressly for seed keeping. Yeah, I certainly don't know of any.
Yeah,
I think a lot of gardens do a little of it. I know 9C, they were actually selling some of the seeds they saved. So gardens might be doing parts of it, but just expressly doing that, I doubt it.
I wonder, like, what do you all, I mean, do you think that would be a benefit? I know we're having these conversations around like political, like, you know, community resiliency. And I think, you know,
it will be a benefit. There's no think to it. Well, yeah, because that's part of what makes us collectively stronger, you know, to harness and save our own seeds. Yeah.
Caitlin has a question in the chat. They asked, I've had success seed saving just from produce I eat. Is this a method that can be used in order to both consume the vegetable and save seeds? My dad does this as well. He during the pandemic was very proud of himself for collecting all of his pepper seeds and his, you know, melon seeds and stuff. Yeah, I'm wondering if you guys have thoughts about that or you know, what the potential issues or challenges might be of doing something like that.
I would say yes. My mother is now into this. So when she cuts things, she saves the seeds for me. So yeah, that's something that's now done. She's now understanding why I'm growing food, and now she's into it, and she does that for me. So yeah, I would say it's a good thing. At the same time, we better know where they come from too. So those are a consideration that possibly has to be made. But why not? People have been doing that for the longest time anyway, saving, you know, the seeds from the foods they like. So why not continue it? And some of the stuff you just can't find anywhere. So, you know, certain communities have it, so you're going to save the seeds and then do it yourself.
I think it's a good practice. It's an ancient practice, you know. So, you know, your food you grow, you save your seeds, you grow again. My mom, I saw my grandmother and my mother do it. My first callaloo seeds that I grew in New York came from Jamaica. My mother gave it to me when I was coming up. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the first foray into seed saving, and hopefully it will grow. Yeah. So we can have that 5 acre in the city, just dedicated to growing seeds.
It seems to me for folks who are buying these produce from the supermarket and saving seeds from that, it seems to strike a little bit of into the direction of like foraging seeds in a way. Like the seeds are there and they're going to be put into a landfill. So how beautiful is it to take them out and at least like give them a chance to sprout even if you just got a windowsill or something. So yeah, I like that comment for sure. I've done it also, and success sometimes and not other times. And it's exciting.
Awesome. Ina was just letting us know that East New York Farms, yeah, shout out to East New York Farms, save seeds, and they also save seeds and distribute them through True Love. True Love, just shout out to True Love. They're also a really amazing seed company that does a lot of crops from the diaspora. You know, obviously Sheryll and Renee are growing from them. East New York are growing for them a lot. And I love that they also have this model where they're collecting seeds from the community. You know, so many seed farms, from what I understand, like they do their own seeds on their own land. And you can even think, Ellie and Ann, maybe this is something you could speak to, like there's those seeds growing in Kelly Street, right, are adapted to a different set of circumstances than the ones in East New York, right? Like there's also a genetic benefit, right? Yeah, which I think Kirk actually asks, what do both of y'all groups select for when you're saving seeds? So do you choose plants that you use for seed, you know, based on certain traits? He's heard save the best, eat the rest. You know, is there ways that you kind of look at and assess what you're gonna collect?
I don't know if we have a specific method. A lot of it is informed by our community and our community needs. Yes, I've heard save the best, eat the rest. And a lot of it is informed by our community and the regions that they come from. Yeah, that's a driving force. And we will grow seeds separately for consuming and seeds for saving, simply because these crops are popular and we want to continue to grow them. But I don't think we have a scientific method. You know, we kind of do it collaboratively, you know, with our community members, and we try to what's the word? We try to be inclusive. So you know, it's interesting what comes out of that. You know, I know, you know, and sometimes we know we're not foolish. We know that this might not work here, but we're gonna try it anyway. We're gonna try and create a microclimate given climate chaos to see if we can grow these particular types of crops here. And a part of the work that we do comes with empathy, because we're dealing with populations that have experienced trauma through civil war, you know, traveling from countries to come to a new country like the US. So it's part of the integrative process. And I don't like to use that word integrative. It's part of allowing them to be who they are and who they were, hold on to a piece of their humanity. And I feel like food is that gateway to justice for them to be able to do that particular, be able to do that. So yeah, I don't think we do it in that way. We do it according to what flows between ourselves and our community. I mean, Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, that's the way I see you save seeds.
Yeah, it's more or less what we feel. It's like what the community members feel, what we want to save, what we can save, the things we have interest in. We're not, yeah, we are totally not scientific about it at all. No, it's like a gut instinct. It's what you feel. That's how we save. Like we would like to have moringa this year. We've been trying forever to have hibiscus bissap from Central African Republic. The things that we have failed at is the things we keep trying. We want, you know, gandules from Puerto Rico. We want Bolivian coriander from Puerto Rico. We've got the stuff that is adapted to this climate. We want to do more. And so why not? See if they taste different. Those things, the curiosity of it all, to wanting to get in touch with things, to reaching out to the community. Those are the things that drive us when we decide to save seeds.
Gotta tell you though, that sugar cane was very good.
Oh God, was it good.
I'm sorry, did you all just say you're growing sugarcane?
We grew it, harvested it, and ate it.
Yeah, I did not realize. What? That's awesome. What was that process like for you?
It was like, you should have seen the gardeners just gathering around, peeling the sugar cane and reminiscing on stories when they were kids growing up in the Caribbean, harvesting sugarcane. That's what I wanted. That's what seed saving does for us. It's a storytelling process. You know, it's really very uplifting.
100%. I see that, right? Even Ellie, you know, and Anne, what you're describing with the cousins.
Yeah.
I think about the families, and families come with stories, and you know, the generations stack upon each other.
Yeah. And now I'm so curious about sugarcane seeds. I've never thought about that. Did they get to make seeds, or you just gobble them up?
We saved some of the suckers because you planted from the suckers. So
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we saved a couple. We're gonna try it again. It was so good this year. We're gonna try it again.
Cool. Yeah, that's a whole other category of plants, is the ones that it's not really practical to do from seed, or that they tend to reproduce vegetatively. And that's also kind of a part of seed saving. It's not a seed, but it's a propagation technique that's, you know, it's part of the whole process. So cool. I'm glad that came up.
Yeah, and thinking about that, I have an obsession with propagating things. I'm always just like, let's put it in water, see what happens, right? Like it taps into my, like, you know, 6-year-old Nathan, who's just like trying to learn how nature works. And I encourage folks to just do that, right? Just to see if it works. But yeah, I wonder, you know, as we're talking about seed saving, do you actually have conversations about propagation and include that into your seed library? Or those like that practice? Is that something you're working on? That's for anyone.
The thing we do is usually Cuban oregano at the end of the year. We take a bunch of clippings and we put it in water. Now we've actually grown some in pots, so they go back into the inside, and then we just keep them for the next year. So usually it was Cuban oregano that really started the clippings.
You made me start to think, Nathan, stories. We tell stories, but we never record them. We don't, you know, we just talk about them and our experiences and our memories around seed saving. Because I thought that this would be a question for our friends who forage because they have a seed library. How to do that?
How to tell stories?
No, how to, you know, I mean, you have a library. I mean, what's your process in seed saving, telling these stories, archiving it, you know? Because we don't have any, it's oral for us.
Yeah.
It's not written down.
Totally. Which is a beautiful tradition also, and very, you know, living and shifting. I think for us, we do archive, right? I mean, because we're artists, we have this relationship to display and presentation, even though so much of our work is like socially engaged and informed by being out in the landscape. But we do have, like, I mean, I'm sitting in my studio, so like this is one of our seed packets here, but it comes with this little kit that basically describes where the plant was collected and why it was collected and by who, and they're often labeled with the story of who collected it and the exact time. And
here's another one.
Yeah. So it's certainly when we exhibit or make media about the work, whether they're videos or booklets or pamphlets, we are trying to capture a kind of hybrid story, or even more than hybrid, that's combines the human and the plant story as both agential in the production of the seeds, and the kind of relationship between weedy plants and people, and certainly between the plants you work with at Kelly Street Garden and people, it seems like. Yeah. Do you want to add?
Photos of the sites where we collect?
We do. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate both forms, right? Like, I think there's like so much value in having an oral tradition, and I also see a lot of value in documenting and carrying that forward in the written form as well. And I'm noticing it almost feels like, Ellie and Anne, your practice is almost more like scientific, or like there's that record keeping that feels very aligned with just like data, right? Which makes sense, right? As you're categorizing these seeds, I picture those giant seed vaults, right?
Yeah.
They're organized.
Yeah. We do enjoy organizing our seeds. Anne in particular.
My day job is a bookkeeper, so I'm probably disoriented that way.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
organization is important.
One thing I was curious about, both of you at Kelly Street, I feel like I heard you mention germination rates. And for us, that's something that we've been interested in terms of the seeds that we save, like what actually comes up. And we can't really test that well because we do germination tests in like a enclosed studio situation with like, you know, artificial lights and love and care, and they sprout, right? But we don't know what's really going to happen when they end up out in the landscape, which is where we want them to go, which is these rugged, rural, feral sites where anything could happen. So I'm curious, I think you said you keep track of your germination rates for some of them, or no?
No, we don't. True Love does. So they would,
got it.
yeah. And so they have the facility. I mean, as a partner, they have the facility to do that. So they test our seeds and they would let us know what the germination rate is like. It's 94% or so. So they have that facility for when we send them the seeds to let us know after testing how successful it is. As to our own germination rate, we never test that. It's a hit or miss. Yeah, I mean, we're just like you. We like try to provide the best growing environment for them. We use outdoors, and when it's warm, we use the greenhouse at New Roots or our grow light system. We have a room that we set up with grow lights. We start there, and sometimes you get nothing, and sometimes, you know, like we get a lot. Like this year, we got so many pigeon please plants growing. It was amazing, you know. So yeah, we don't have the time or the capacity, not
either.
to test the germination rate. And if it fails, we just make another tray and try again. Totally. That's how we do it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that.
I mean, I think that speaks to the fact that like growing food is hard, right? And so like to grow food and to save seeds and to compost and then to cook the food, prepare the food, you know, like that's a lot of things. And so like it's, you know, I understand now more than ever why there are people whose express job is just to collect seeds, you know, and like that we each kind of maybe have different roles we play. And some of us kind of do all of them, sort of. And then there are people who like, that's what they do, right? You know, and I think probably most of the people here are people who want to do things sort of. So I just think that's a really interesting distinction to make, that like you don't, you know, like all things, right? You don't have to be 100% perfect at it in order to try and do it. Ina asked you, she wanted you guys to clarify a little bit about planting sugarcane in New York City. And I'm curious too. I mean, I guess Kelly Street is enclosed, so you do have a bit of a microclimate there, I would imagine, that maybe helps.
Yeah, it does help. And Ina, nice to see you. It's been a long time. We tried it for 3 years, and this time we got it. We realized that the more heat that we have is the better it will germinate. So growing stuff, we have these big buildings. We have buildings, the beds that are against the buildings that we live in, that generates the most heat. So that's where we would create the trench and grow the sugarcane. But at New Roots, we have these big buildings that are on one side of the farm, and that's huge. And our greenhouse is in that space. So we would because it get, and this we don't have anything that blocks the sun that comes on that side. So we start all our propagation there where we get the most heat, and we planted it outside in that area where we would get the most sun, and where the heat island effect is more effective. And that's how we were able to grow the sugarcane. It's the heat and the water, but always the heat.
But I would also add that it was also started early enough to do so.
That's
Without that having been done, it wouldn't have helped.
Yes, agree.
Yeah. So March, if necessary, February, January, stayed in the house. Do not overwater it. We did that last year. It just died. So understand the watering conditions helped ever so much. The failure the year before made the success this year. Failure is success. We've done it enough.
And I love that you're using the built environment, like you're using, passive, like what often we'd be like, oh, I can't grow, there's buildings all around me. Like, no, you're figuring out how to take something that would be considered an obstacle to being able to grow and figuring out what benefits it brings to your practice. I love that. That's so smart. So smart. Cool. Does anyone else have any other questions? Or I don't know, Nathan, what should we ask now?
Well, I imagine a lot of people like myself are a part of this conversation because we want to, start our seed libraries, right, successfully, or even like, maybe not even start a seed library, maybe just start saving one plant seed. I'm just curious if we could go around because we do, we're at 10 minutes to 8, wrapping up, get a little Q&A in maybe, but wanted to just like hear from y'all what your thoughts are, feedback for folks who are trying to kickstart a seed library. Like, what would your advice be for them?
Well, I think we heard earlier that failure is the success, right? So just start would be one thing. I mean, we have a few basic tips, right? And you've written them up for us. For certain seeds, right? They're all different, but in general, keeping them, a lot of the ones we work with like to be dry and cool, but not cold. Paying really careful attention to the plant over time so you don't miss them. That means just being aware of the cycles of the seasons. Not all plants are going to be like, it's September, here's my seeds. So you kind of need to know what to look for. A lot of the seeds
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No. Yeah, please.
I was just going to say saving them in a breathable container.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't want them to start exuding the little bit of moisture they've gotten left and molding. So yeah, the dry, cool, breathable situation for a lot of the things we work with. Yeah.
And I think for seed saving, for me, a lot of observation is really key. If you really want, there's some seeds that are easy to save. Like for instance, you grow callaloo, it goes to seed, it drops seed. It's easy to save those seeds, but other crops that you're not familiar with, observation is always the key. Watch them through the growing cycle, as you say, pay attention. And, if you fail, take into consideration what you did and what kind of changes and tweaks you can make. Because like one of the easiest observations, like it didn't flower. Oh, because the temperature started to drop, and this is a tropical crop. So maybe I need to start it a month earlier. And maybe I need to start it in a condition that creates that warm microclimate that will get it to germinate early, like in February or March, that when the temperatures get warm enough for me to transplant it outside, I've up-potted it enough, it's big enough for me to transplant it outside, and it gets a head start. So, for me, observation is really the key, and you learn a lot from how plants grow and how plants adapt to an environment by just watching them, by just paying attention to them.
Yep.
I would also add, look at seed saving catalogs, and also things like Johnny's, Owen from True Love Seeds actually has an Instagram account. Look at that. Read books. Green Thumb does it. Look at as much as you can, as much as you're able to do, and learn from that as well. But also sit there and understand your plants. Just learn, look at them. They're telling you so much. You just have to learn to do that, be in communion with them, and in community. You will learn so much from just looking at a plant. Some of them, you do not need to do anything. Leave them alone. They will grow beautifully. Don't touch them. Just let them be. As Miss B once said to me, let them be. That would be the greatest thing you can do. There's such a thing as too much parenting, too much overwatering. Sometimes you just got to let things be. You'll learn a lot. It's a good foundation for life and learning life skills.
Yes.
So true.
Shout out to Miss B. Yo, she is famous in the Bronx. Appreciate her wisdom always.
Great. Yeah. If anyone else has any other questions, I was just going to say, I'm sitting here next to some seeds that I've been observing over the past week, my friend gave me some prickly ash. My friends brought me some prickly ash, and it's been so amazing to observe how what started as like little red fruits that you could put in your mouth and they would like tingle, have in just the span of a week turned into these like black, beautiful, shiny seeds. And I'm about to save some and plant them out next spring, but then plant some in the wild and see whether they show up. And so it's always just, yeah, even over the course of a week to watch something kind of change in your hand is so remarkable. I didn't know that they were going to turn this beautiful, shiny black color. It's super cool. Yes, I think True Love Seeds Instagram, Audrey, is at seedkeeping. Yes, I think that's right. And I just wanted to share my screen. Actually, I don't think I got a chance to ask you, Sheryll and Renee. If folks, so Ann and Ellie, maybe we can just throw it in the chat, and Sheryll and Renee, if you can throw it in the chat and just let us know like how else we can connect with you. I think someone had asked if they could volunteer. What are ways that we can continue to engage with your work and help support it? Yeah, exactly. Jane just asked, how can we support the work? So if you guys want to throw some links in the chat, I think that would be really useful. And while y'all are doing that, I just thought that there was something really interesting that kind of struck me that, you know, Sheryll and Renee, you're growing crops with folks coming from other places, right? And who are using this, who are doing this practice of growing the crops that are culturally relevant to them as a way of connecting to place and retaining part of their identity. And Ellie and Ann, you are often working with plants that are also immigrants and that were also brought here, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. And so I just think there's something really interesting about the fact that like we see diaspora in both of those conversations, right? One maybe, you know, more current, more contemporarily troubled, but perhaps, you know, many of the crops we see on the street, right, are also have very troubled histories as well, right? That wasn't really a question. I don't know. It was just the thing I thought. But if you have things to say about that, yeah, I'd love to hear them.
I mean, I was kind of thinking in regards to the kind of little heat island effect happening at Kelly Street where the sugarcane could grow and climate chaos. Just the idea that recently we heard that New York City is going to be like a subtropical like setting soon enough. And as we start thinking about what plants and what people we're gonna, God, I hope, welcome as climate chaos forces more and more migration. The way, if you want to call it urban nature or the green space in the city, is going to evolve. Is going to involve these plants that probably, you know, maybe originated on the same continent in the age of Pangea, right? Dandelion, and then they got like fractured everywhere. And I'm, you know, also just kind of going all over with this, but I'm really curious what that new subtropical, like what kind of abundance how we can frame that as a potential for abundance rather than this, like, of course it's loss and of course it's violence on many levels, and there's going to be a lot of connections that are broken, but what new ones are going to form when working with these weedy plants. It's just, I think, helped me be able to be in the city and have some form of hope, I guess. So yeah.
I really appreciate that, and I do think about. I mean, I think about that a lot. I remember Mary Mattingly had an exhibit at Storm King where she installed palm trees to talk about how in 2050 they could be native trees, like they could actually, well, not native, they could be introduced trees here.
Yeah.
And it really both scared me and also gave me hope that like, okay, there's like such large issues around like transportation of foods, right? That really meet community where they need to be, right? Like mangoes and things are always being requested in our gardens, right? Like how dope would it be to be able to grow mangoes for once, right? With those that, you know, could bring their mango, you know, sapling or branch. I learned the other day in, you know, the tropics, right? You can just put a branch in the soil and it'll grow. Yeah, I think that's an abundance, right?
Propagation.
Propagation.
Maybe
I'd like
50
to
years
add-
from now. Ooh, go ahead, Renee.
Oh, sorry. No, so we're also trying to grow some tamarind trees. So we like have 4 of them and some soursops. So yeah, so we're trying to do that too. And we've also done some Mayor lemons. So we started from them. So that's been like 2 years and we're hoping one day to actually get lemons. So yeah, we're crazy like that.
Is
The
that
twisted fork.
phrase making lemons from lemonade? So that would be literal lemons.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I love it. May there be sugar cane and Meyer lemons. May we all be drinking the lemonade at Kelly Street Garden for many years to come. I love that. Really beautiful. And here it is. It's 8:01. I mean, if anybody else has any last questions or thoughts that we want to close out with, I'll just stop talking so that you can do that if you want.
Other than to say it's a fitting end to my Friday afternoon. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you so much, Candace and Nathan, for bringing us together. That's great.
Yeah, this was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Our pleasure. Nathan, anything else from you?
No, it's always a pleasure, Renee and Sheryll, to see you, and a real pleasure to meet you, Ellie and Annie and Anne. And I hope to, come together again in the future, for that.
And I'm just going through the participant list. Thank you to my friends for showing up. I said Ina, Cordelia, Jane. Oh my God. Yeah, and others. Thank you. Natalia, I see you too.
Yeah, shout out to the 25 people who want to talk about seeds on a Friday night. I'm so glad that we've got a crew. Very exciting. Cool, y'all. Thank you all so much. May you have a wonderful weekend. Nathan, I think I'll see you tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Nathan, do you want to tell them about any upcoming events or anything?
Unfortunately, our park will be closed. So Concrete Plant Park is not a space to visit. The Foodway can't visit this winter, but we'll have a harvest festival at Starlight Park, just north of it near West Farms in the Bronx, on the 13th, November 13th. You can go to bronxriver.org. Other than that, I'll be hanging out in Starlight for the most part. Oh, tomorrow, apologies. Tomorrow there is an event happening at the Bronx Zoo, though it is booked. I encourage people, if you're free, to come through. Along the Mitsubishi River Walk, we'll be hosting my coworker Roderick Bell, and Musketsu Consulting will be hosting an Indigenous Reflections of the 16th Century, a pop-up Indigenous village, to just share with folks their heritage as members of the Shinnecock and the Powhatan nations, what an Indigenous village looks like. And so we'll be cooking, we'll be doing some paddling on the Bronx River. So come say hey. Want to come out? It'll be from 11 to 4 tomorrow at the Mitsubishi River Walk, which is from the Boston Road entrance of the Bronx.
I like that. Indigenous village on the Mitsubishi Walk.
I was trying to not think about that. Yeah. Also, next Tuesday, Nathan and I are doing another Zoom, also in honor of Native American Heritage Month. We're going to be in conversation with Katari, who is a Kichwa tribal nation member, who does a lot of work between the so-called Ecuadorian Amazon and here. We will be joined by Roderick Bell, who is Nathan's coworker, who is part of the Mitsubishi River Walk Indigenous pop-up tomorrow, and my friend Alexis Nicole Nelson, who many people probably know as Black Forager on TikTok. They will be talking about and deconstructing the colonial concept of wilderness. So we're really excited about that talk and to kind of imagine, to both unpack the past and the present and the many hopeful abundant futures of Black and Indigenous land stewardship. So that I'm gonna throw the link right there in the chat. If you wanna sign up, we'd be happy to have you. And with that,
Okay.
I think we're good, right? I never know how to end these, aside from just being like, okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all
Thanks
so
so much,
much.
everyone.
Pleasure, y'all.
Take care.
Soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.